Hello and welcome to a episode of the Euro blog for November 2022. Small disclaimer, this video may well contain triggers as we do talk about suicide, anxiety, depression, as well as things like substance abuse and a range of mental health difficulties that people face every day. So please, if you do go into this, do just be aware and make sure you look after yourself before and after, especially if that means talking to someone else and getting their support. Now, onto the vlog. Hello and welcome back to You Were Right, the Movember vlog for 2022. I'm joined again by Will, and this is day 6.
Hello.
Yes, day 6. And we are looking at the same topic that we looked at yesterday, which is, do other people need to be involved in the conversation about male health? Now, from speaking with Hannah yesterday, she gave an insight of an outside perspective that isn't male. And today we're going to have a chat about it from, well, a man's perspective, from both myself and Will. We established yesterday that it's important to, have other people in that conversation because everyone needs to be involved to make sure the support around it and everything improves. But I'm just wondering on your views on it, Will.
Well, I think it's very important that it's not just men discussing men's mental health, because the first thing you need to be aware of is men don't exist in a vacuum. There will always be non-men in a man's life, and it's fundamental that they're involved in the conversation in the same way that it's important for men to be involved in the conversation about women's safety. And I think it's just very important that it's understood that we're allowed to have these conversations and talk about how we're feeling without it necessarily being about anything else as well. There seems to be this sort of attitude of what ifism, or sort of yeah but sort of attitude. And I think it's very important that when men talk about men's health and men's mental health, the conversation can just stay about that as opposed to being about other topics as well.
I think that's a very common thing, that. And I think that's why people draw away from involving others in the conversation, because very often it's, but what about? Where, it's not what about, we're not discounting the fact that that's going on. We're just acknowledging something that is often acknowledged. And just what you were saying there about, that men aren't the only people in men's lives. I did a very quick Google. Now, this is 2019, so it's slightly out of scope. But 50.4% of people in the world are men. Roughly, again, it's 2 years out of date, which actually shows there are a lot of people that aren't blokes.
This is true.
And so it kind of gives a bit more clarification to your point there. But no, I think you're completely right with that actually not actually something that I thought of when I was sitting here, or when I thought about this before, is that actually how often that conversation changes.
Yeah, I find it often gets derailed because obviously you can't ignore sort of the social context of there is generally a position of power involved in being a man, particularly straight, white, cisgendered man, all of that stuff. And you can't ignore that. However, it does seem to be a trend where if I was to talk about my mental health with some of the women in my life, whether they mean to or not, it's very rarely, oh yeah, but women have it worse. It's not generally like that, but that does tend to end up where the conversation becomes. And I think it's just very important, just for people who aren't men, to just be aware of where the conversation becomes steered towards, and just let us have a space in which to talk. When we're saying that here are the issues that men are having in terms of, self-confidence, perceived value, self-esteem, etc. Let the conversation just be about that, and let men have the space.
Because I think you're also at risk of having you opening yourself up to someone, and then that being the last time you open yourself up to someone, because it becomes derailed. I mean, I couldn't count the amount of times I think I've spoken to people and they instantly connect something that I've told them to something that's happened to them, and then run off down that pathway of something that happened to someone else they knew, and then And there's nothing wrong with a rounded conversation. At some point we have to put it all together and talk about it.
Yeah.
But normally, in the first steps of a man, believing he can break this shell of being a man and having that little bit of freedom, I think that's kind of like the most fragile time when people get
Yeah.
stopped.
There's a lot of overcoming things, and just to bring it back to what you said about people often like to relate things that you say back to themselves, and it's not necessarily them trying to take over the conversation and make it about them. A lot of the time, because I do this as well, a lot of the time that's just people trying to say, I've been there too, I'm with you on that, but it gets misconstrued or you end up talking about that. But also, as you say, for men to open up about these things, it's such a new thing for men to be sort of expected to do. And there's such a feeling of being out of your comfort zone when you're talking to someone, particularly someone who's not another man, about your mental health, that the slightest derailing of the conversation come at them and go, well, I tried, and wipe their hands of it.
I'm done.
And you have to sort of let them. I hate to use like with children as an analogy because obviously that's problematic, but when it's the first time a man's opening up about something, just let them say what they have to say. Make the conversation all about them, and then if you want to relate your own experiences to it, do that further down the line when they're more comfortable with having that conversation and bringing it up again in future. You have to let that first time happen and breathe.
More like children. I think it's if you take away the like children and just put like it's the first time. The first time I did anything, I was terrified. I know the first time that I decided to do funky karaoke, it was horrifying. The first time I decided to go sailing, it was horrifying. The first time I decided to teach, it was terrifying. If someone had stood there and tried to derail me at any one of those points, I doubt I'd ever do any of those things again, which is problematic for my life job. But I had the support the first time, and now I can carry on doing it because I had that support that first time. And sometimes it's not even support. Sometimes we just need to be listened to.
Just let it happen. And there's a lot of men are worried that other people in their lives, and without wanting to generalize, a lot of men are worried that the women in their lives are going to hear them talk about their mental health and things that they're sensitive about and come out of their shell. And they're worried that may be weaponized against them in future. So they're having an argument a month down the line, and then they may bring that back up against them, and they go, right, well, I'm never going to say that again to anyone because clearly it just becomes ammunition, and that needs to not happen.
That they'll go and tell their friends, and they'll be in
the
group chats.
Chat
I mean, I've been close to an awful lot of females that have heard something of their equivalent other, and then told a group of us that don't know that significant other that well. And it's like, well, why are you telling me this? It's completely irrelevant to me. You've just made this person's experience into gossip.
Yeah, and I realize there's probably a slight difference in sort of culture and attitude around these things. And, there's the whole sort of stereotype of women like to share more in the group chat. But I think that's because they've been allowed to be open about how they're feeling for so much longer. And for men, it's so much more a delicate thing still. I imagine one day it will get there. But at the moment, it's such a delicate thing that the moment you then go and tell your friends, they're like, oh, well, I guess my privacy means nothing. Just let it be between you, and just treat what they have to say with a certain level of dignity, because it's scary for people to open up.
I think there's the term that's made right now is acknowledgement. Is that, if you are listening, be an active listener. And this goes to other men, other women, non-binary people. This goes to moms, dads, brothers, sisters, boyfriends, mates, maybe not enemies. But not. Be an active listener with it. Don't just sit there like this, like, yeah, oh, that's so bad. Yeah, that's terrible. Because in another way, you need to be part of this conversation so that they can come out and people can heal and we can all be one happy family, for at least for better words. But then that doesn't happen because you're like, oh, really? Oh, that sounds horrible. Oh, well.
And there's a fine line to tread between contributing and, as we said earlier, accidentally making it about you.
Yeah.
But it's sort of not enough to just listen, because as any woman will say when you're talking to them about obviously the massive issues we're having with violence against women at the moment, or well, throughout history, it's not enough to just go, oh my God, I empathize. You have to ask what you can do to help and how we as a group can do better. And I think the same principle works the other way around. If I'm talking to one of the non-men in my life, for them to just go, oh yeah, that's tough. Fair enough. I feel heard. But if you go, how can I help? What can we do? What can I go back and tell my friends that they need to improve on? Or what can I call my friends out for? What behaviors can I discourage to make this an actual substantial difference in your life?
And there's that word as well. What can I do? Instead of have you tried this?
Yeah.
Which is something, to the self growth for me earlier this year. That actually, those words are very different things. Offering advice and offering support are two very different pathways. And sometimes people are asking for advice. What do you think I should do? And then feel free. That's your opportunity to go.
Just
I've
make sure
done
you know
this.
what they're asking for.
Yeah, but if they don't, then it's not bad to offer advice, but it may sound kind of like, well, have you tried this? Have you tried this? And if you're someone who's long in the toe with everything that's been going on with yourself, then hearing that's a little bit like, do you not think I've tried this? Do you not,
Especially
or
because
actually,
most men will have tried everything else, and being open about it is probably the last thing on their list, and that's the scariest thing. So if you go, oh, have you tried meditation? Yep. Have you tried, taking up a sport or something to get the frustration out? Yeah. And it doesn't work substantially. We're social creatures. We need to communicate. So yeah.
So I think that's a nice little rounded side on the males. Or from our perspective, we don't speak for all men. We can really only speak to ourselves, but we can give a good summary of what it's like to be a man and why it is important for other people to be involved in that conversation and be willing to hear that conversation. Will, do you have any closing remarks?
Only that I think it's not just about women being involved in the conversation. Obviously, you've mentioned it once or twice. Non-binary people are also very important in this because they have this intersectional view on how gender and gender stereotypes and gender roles can work, almost like an outside perspective, like they've may have seen both and they know what it's like to operate in between. And if you've got any non-binary friends, they can have a very interesting perspective and become a good catalyst for having open conversations about what expectations there are of you as a man or man presenting, and you may get some benefits from that as well.
Unbelievably, I think that's a really good shout on that. It's something that, at the end of the day, they've had to be open about something literally destroying the stereotypes of the world we live in.
Yeah.
And I think at some point we all have got to destroy these stereotypes of the world we live in, because at the end of the day, we all just need to be allowed to live and be happy with living.
There's nothing wrong with presenting as a man, a woman, or anything in between, as long as you understand what's involved in that and the implications, and don't try and make other people conform.
Yeah.
Because live and let live.
Live and let live. As long as you're not a to me, I won't be a to you, and we can live and let live.
Absolutely.
One of the best quotes I've ever read right there. But I'll leave this conversation there. Thank you, Will, for coming on. Guys, the Movember charity is trying to make a difference every year, every day of every year, and more than any inside this month. So please, if you can donate, the link will be somewhere. Anyway, you're watching this from. So please do consider donating, and I will see you tomorrow for day number 7.
Peace.
Have a good day, guys. Bye.
Thank you for watching that You're Alright blog. It's been a phenomenal journey that we've been on to get this far, and we're hoping that it will long outlive the vlog series. But it's not over there. There is more to be done, and there is a donation link to the Movember charity inside the description. If you can donate, please do consider it, or even if you can just spread that link far and wide to get as many people to donate as possible, that's also fantastic. We are actively making a change, and you're part of that. So thank you. I'll see you tomorrow.